If we want a change in Congress, we have to have a change in your congressman. And in order to do that, you must have a person that is qualified and experienced in doing so. And so therefore, that is why I'm running. Not because I want to run to Washington to be part of the politics of Washington, but actually to go to Washington for we the people and make changes in how we as a state and as a district are treated in Washington, D.C. Washington has far too much power. The states has far too little power. And on top of that, they are now doing nothing for the people. And so therefore, I go to represent you in what you want done in the 4th District in Washington, D.C. My experience has been 4 generations of military men that have served in my family. From my great uncles, to my father, to myself in Desert Storm, and now my son will return from Kuwait on June 20th, his birthday. So I'm real glad to have him to serve the country just like we were taught to serve. I've also served the community. In Durham, I was a Durham Planning Commission in order to fight for affordable housing and to allow for people to have access to their own personal property rights. And then also I fought in Durham to allow seniors to be able to have a senior center in the rural part of the county instead of everyone in the rural county having to come down into the city. So I've been fighting for the people for a very long time, over 15 years. And also the fact that now, even today, I challenge the students at North Carolina Central to become something better than they thought they could be by raising the bar through our Spirit Center of Excellence program, which means student participation in research, innovation, and technology. See, I was blessed to have 35 plus years in IT at IBM and as a local entrepreneur with my own businesses. And now it is time to give back. And I've always believed in the principle of pay it forward. So I appreciate you checking in. I appreciate your vote on June 7th, and I look forward to answering the questions today. God bless. Thank you. Running for Congress was never an initial thought of mine. I always was happy working in the backgrounds to help people at the street level, and I always thought that Congress was always too convoluted in order to get the people's job done. So I would be called a street activist. I call myself an advocate for people, for the rights of people, for the ability for people to own their own lives and to aspire to be whatever they dream to be, helping them get there. The other thing is what happened with the inactivity under Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid of moving bills to the president's desk in order for him to either veto or sign them. That didn't change when we turned around and changed Congress and had a majority in the Republican hands. And unfortunately, this stalemate still goes on. I'm running to unblock the stalemate so that we, the people, can have our voices and what we want done in the 4th District in America to get done by creating coalitions with like-minded people of the House. I just happen to get angry enough to say we've had enough inactivity and we, the people, have to be represented. It's the same as far as economics, but I approach things differently. I know me as one voice can only vocalize what the district wants as far as what they're thinking about. But also, a part of being in Congress is getting with your colleagues to find the ones that have like minds. I've been working on the Hill, going to congressman after congressman when the Affordable Care Act was being considered with Dr. C.L. Gray. and we were talking to members of Congress about the bad bill that was being presented before the congressional delegation. The whole idea is to get a coalition of congressmen, and the way to get the coalition of congressmen is to have the people understand what's going on. Jobs need to be, one, created through the reduction of regulations. Jobs have to be secured to stay here by getting rid of H-1B1 visa statuses and allow companies to use E-Verify so that American citizens have cracks at jobs before any foreign worker has the ability to either come here or take a job from an American worker. We must make sure that people that are qualified, that are Americans, have those jobs first before we go outside. And then on top of that, we have to secure our borders. I am a strong believer in term limits. Golly, these folks that make a career out of going to Washington need to be sent home. The amount of years that you should serve in Congress should be left up to the people to put it into a constitutional amendment, because both houses do not have enough, as we say in New York, chutzpah, in order to regulate themselves. I think 12 years, 2 terms in the Senate, 6 terms in the House, is plenty to get stuff done. And if you can't get it done in that period of time, you need to sit yourself down and let somebody else who has more capability than yourself to step in and lead the way. You either lead, follow, or get out of the way. It's time that leaders lead, and those who just sit around and hold their tongue and just wag along political lines need to go home, because the people's job is not getting done.
What do you propose as an energy policy for our country, and what implications would your energy policy have on national security and employment, both nationally and in North Carolina?
There's a couple of things on energy that we need to change. But we need to change in a way in which government isn't the change agent. It has to be innovation and getting the current industries such as oil, such as gas, such as solar, such as water and nuclear, to think of new innovative ways in which they can make the cost of energy more competitive. Getting rid of the federal regulations that stops the selling of energy across borders of states. Allowing a free market environment to allow the people and the utilization of the markets to standardize on their own. Government subsidies, out. No government should be picking winners and losers in the game of commercialization. That should be left up to the market forces that are out in the sectors. And so therefore there shouldn't be any special regulation creating this energy monopoly. Also, we need to be able to cut and reduce regulations that don't do harm to people and the environment.
What do you believe is the appropriate role for the federal government in working to address poverty in our district?
As a minister, one of the scriptures says, the poor will always be among us. But we have a responsibility to take care of orphans, widows, and poor. But that is not the role of government. That is the role of creating innovation in the workspace of the communities to create handouts, not handouts. You must have the ability to set a bar higher and then help people achieve that higher expectation. This is what government subsidy programs that have no regulation on how to get off of them does. It allows people to rise to their lowest expectations. We need to change the expectations of individuals to rise up and use their God-given talents and help them use those talents to achieve a better life for themselves. There isn't a single parent that I have met that says that they don't want a better life for their child than they had. But how do you get that? That is not the role of government. That is for the people to incentivize. But government through the state arena, in which the people have access to, should be responsible for helping create that environment.
If elected, how will you support job growth, new business development, and increased employment in the Triangle area?
That's easy. It really is. Because of the fact, I grew up in the park with IBM. And some of the things out in the park that stifled business was regulations coming out of D.C. We had a manufacturing assembly line that we took and we roboticized. We made the first color monitors, and then regulations came in from D.C. that had nothing to do with our manufacturing process, but had everything to do with how our monitors were disposed of. Well, that monitor has been sold and gone out of our inventory. But yet, because of those regulations, we had to change and scrap our robotic assembly line, which increased our cost and eventually shut the line down. We need to reduce the regulations. We need to open up entrepreneurial space, almost like they tried to do with free trade zones, to allow people to come in, innovate, and not be penalized for failure, so long as they get up and try again. Edison failed 10,000 times, they say, at making the light bulb. But because he achieved it one time, we have flickering lights above us. This Cray is another example of innovation that made things different for employment here in the area.
Again, the topic is national security. Question: should the U.S. government require that companies build security backdoors to the systems?
There's nothing more grievous for the federal government to overstay the constitutional rights of individuals. We, the people, have to stand up against them. But it has to be more than lip service. We can talk about all we want about the fact that no, there shouldn't be a back door. No, companies should not make accommodations for the federal government or any other government. The thing is, what do you do about it? I personally am working on a patent right now that closes every piece of data unless it is the individual that gives that permission to that entity. And that is through biometric data encryption. That means they need you to agree to allow them to look at your records. The assumption is they're going to steal it. The thing is, how do you protect it? And what we do is we create new technology that says, backdoor or not, the citizen's privacy, because the Constitution, trumps all. And the only way to do that is to give the power back in the hands of the people. So if I can control my biometric security, then nobody can read my records unless I want them to. Thank you.
Do you think the war on drugs is working? If not, how would you change it?
The war on drugs is an utter failure. We have spent more money trying to legislate and fix moralities of individuals. One thing I've learned in D.C. is you cannot legislate morality. Look at what's happening in North Carolina. Every time, everything that we thought was right is now wrong. Everything that used to be wrong is now considered right. We have to come up with a new policy of people being able to be served for their dependency and not encourage street prices and backdoor black markets, which in essence the drug trade is, in order to fulfill an individual's desire or addiction. But at the same time, we have to encourage them that the addiction is not good for their future. And now we're moving it into prescriptive medicine. We have to make sure that doctors are held accountable for the prescriptions that they prescribe, that they're able to understand everything that a patient is being prescribed. We have a huge problem in our senior population. Every time they go to the doctor writes a script. I know seniors that have 15 scripts that they got to take a day, and they don't know which one is doing them harm or which one is doing them good.
How should Congress move forward in dealing with hostile states and non-states? For example, ISIS.
As a service member and a veteran, I took an oath. And that oath stands even yet today, because there was no expiration on that oath. And that was to serve and to protect the United States and the Constitution against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. The question then becomes, do we get involved in a 2,000-year war? And whether or not that affects our safety here at home. My son, my youngest son, is serving in Kuwait right now because of this war. And so this is personal. It isn't a thought or a hyperbole. We must do everything we can to ensure the safety of Americans both at home and abroad. They must be warned of the problems abroad. And if they choose to go and yet get in trouble, they've been forewarned. We will try our best, but there's no guarantee. The problem I have is with journalists who decide to walk into the middle of a war zone and then get kidnapped. They're an American citizen. We should do what we can to rescue them and bring them home safely. But at the same time, we need to stay and let them fight their civil war.
My question is, because of policies that have existed right through today, we have, and we know we have, many cells that wish us harm within America. What would you do? And maybe a kind of a difficult question for such a quick follow-up. How would you deal with that existing problem within America, in the country?
Because we already have cooperation between local, state, and federal agencies. We need to work on more credible information so that we know that something's going to happen before San Bernardino happens. One of the biggest failures of San Bernardino was the fact that their neighbors saw the activity. But what happened? Political correctness forced them not to say anything about the weapons that they saw going into the house, the huge gatherings that they had in the garage at night. And so they said, well, political correctness says, I don't want to say anything because otherwise I'm going to be called a racist. Well, we need to stop that. We need to understand by inaction, we promote another's action. If it ends up being wrong, be quick to say, I'm sorry. You don't have to go and accuse everybody like in profiling. But if there's credible evidence that you see something going on, call the authorities. Let them know.
Should immigration reform be comprehensive, or will you separate border security from other issues?
It is both the same side of the same coin. It's not like the opposite side of the same coin. Border security occurs in all 50 states. Quite different than what my colleague here says. Every single person that flies into an international airport has the ability to be here illegal after their visa expires. Students that come here on the student F visa that are no longer going to be in school need to go home. People who come on H-1B ones and yet are here taking a job from an American that is already qualified should go home. People who sit up there and come on vacation cruises to America, when their visa expires, they need to go home. Why do I get on this? 400 to 500,000 people are estimated in 2014 to overstay their visa, and we don't know where they were. Don't know where they are. Your 9/11 hijackers came here on a student visa, disappeared, didn't know where they were until they flew into the buildings. We've got a cell now in the United States that started in Florida. We don't know where they are. Border security is all the way around, from physical, technological, and administrative.
Thank
you. Mr. Kimball, in your view, what is the best way to improve our standing in the world?
I'm trying to be politically correct.
Don't do it.
I don't give a toot about our standing of what other people think of us. I care about how Americans feel about America. Whether they believe that it is still the land of the free, the home of the brave. Whether they feel as if this is still a land of opportunity for Americans, not a haven for those who come from less fortunate areas. It's always going to look better in America than somewhere else. It's always going to look better to come across the border. It's always going to look better to stay longer than you should. It's always going to be better to come here to get an education and not go home. That's the problem. We need to make sure that in all things, America comes first to Americans. And let those in the world think of us whom they may. So that the problems in the world, there's an organization that's supposed to be taking care of the problem, and it's just as failed as the first attempt of the first organization that did that. The League of Nations failed, and now the UN is failing. All of this should have been falling up underneath their charter to do. We must make sure that Americans become proud again of America.
So, in view of America's tremendous national debt, I believe we owe a little bit of money to people. Why do we continue giving foreign aid to over 125 countries? And if you're elected, would you continue that?
Once again, this one we agree on. Zero foreign aid. Foreign aid started after World War II, where the American dollar was used to prop up both Europe and the Japanese economy. The whole problem is that now we are falsely propping up our own dollar. Because when we came off the gold standard, we now have money that is controlled through the Treasury and through the Feds, in which they can print more or print less. That's how come there's no reining in on Congress about increasing the debt limit. I don't know a single household in America that can go to the bank and say, I want more credit, and then go to their job and say, you got to pay me more because I got more credit, except for the federal government. If Europe eventually has the euro that then stabilizes the European nations without the backing of the US dollar, if other currencies around the world start to hold their own, like China is now hoarding gold and so is Russia to come off the US dollar standard, when they start doing that, we're now moving in a point of economic collapse for the US. And nobody's going to come to our aid. Nobody's going to rush in to say, here's some money, and it's not a loan.
What is your view of Common Core?
My view of Common Core is the same view as I have on any overreach of federal government in Washington telling the citizens of North Carolina or any state what to do with how they educate or live within their state if it is not stated in the Constitution. Common Core is a way to try to standardize education across the United States to a standard that may not apply. One size does not fit all. Common Core, along with a whole lot of other programs and regulations out of DC, need to end, need to cease and desist. The ones who know best about the education of their children and how they should succeed are parents. And the states should have the ability to create competitive programs in that state through block grants from the federal government only because the federal government has our money and we want it back. And we want to be able to utilize it as we see fit so that our children in RTP end up as productive citizens of RTP in this area, and people who live in Iowa have a different educational standard that is successful for their environment. That does not come out of D.C. That comes out of the communities across the nation. It comes out of Raleigh, Durham, Orange County. It comes from the state of North Carolina and every state in the union. Does not need to come out of D.C. because D.C. does not know what the heck it's doing.